You're watching UATV News. My name is Ina Kosinska. Good evening. Residents of Ukraine on the temporarily occupied territories of Crimea, certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions are forced to survive in conditions of violation of their rights and freedoms. Lyudmila Denisova, Commissioner of the Parliament of Ukraine for Human Rights, stated this during the meeting of the 48th session of the UN Human Rights Council. She called on the international community to put pressure on Russia to restore the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Ukrainian citizens are persecuted by the Russian Federation. On September 3rd and 4th, after illegal searches by the Russian FSB in the houses of the first deputy head of the Majlis Nariman Judal and 4 more Crimean Tatars, they were arrested. 58 Crimeans were detained near the FSB building. Some of them were arrested. Russia is militarizing the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. This threatens security and stability throughout Central Europe. In addition, according to Lyudmila Denisova, almost 1,400 Ukrainians were killed in the Donbas as a result of Russia's armed aggression. 121 citizens of Ukraine are still being illegally detained on the territory of the temporarily occupied Crimea and in Russia. On the territory of certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, 296 people. Russia is destroying the Minsk agreements by blocking the access of the OSCE monitoring mission in Donbas. The Kremlin is trying to prevent the presence of observers in order to supply weapons with impunity to certain areas of Luhansk and Donetsk regions. This was stated by Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba at the Warsaw Security Forum. The head of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry discussed NATO's role in Europe with his colleagues from Poland, Finland and Turkey. In particular, the threat of Russian influence.
Entire Russian policy towards NATO is based on the principle that the very existence of NATO is a provocation. So when you start thinking, what can NATO do in order not to further provoke Russia, it's an overcomplication of the whole effort, because whatever you do will be perceived by Russia as a provocation.
And NATO, as we know, if it wants to maintain its credibility, it has to stand firm in both these areas. And we have to be aware of the fact that Russia will not, everything indicates, for the time being, will not refrain from various provocations that have a character of a hybrid war. And we have to, these days, to be prepared for that.
Ukraine and Georgia will become NATO members regardless of Russia's position. This was stated by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. He assured that all the efforts of the countries on the way to joining the alliance will be actively supported by its member states.
It's only for NATO members and Georgia and Ukraine to decide when they are ready to join, not Russia, so we support their efforts to modernize, to reform, to meet the NATO standards. And when 30 allies agree that they are ready to join, they will join. I cannot tell you when that will happen, but that's the only way that this can be dealt with. Having said that, I think it's obvious that it won't happen tomorrow, that they will join. So therefore, my message to NATO allies, and also something I discussed actually yesterday with President Biden, is that we need to step up and do more for those aspirant countries. Because as long as they are not members, we should provide more support, more training, more capacity building, help to implement reforms, fight corruption and build the security and defense institutions. Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General.
President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Israeli leader Isaac Herzog discussed at Mariinsky Palace the situation on the contact line and what else Kyiv can do to return the occupied Crimea. But two countries are united not only by our territorial integrity issue, space exploration, fight against cyber threats, and Israeli investments in areas where Ukraine is strong will be beneficial for both countries. Our correspondent will tell you more.
Presidents of Ukraine and Israel talked about Russian aggression at Donbas and occupied Crimea during their meeting. Volodymyr Zelenskyy assured Isaac Herzog that after the Crimean Platform Summit, Kyiv is ready to take next step to return the peninsula occupied by Russia. In particular, within the framework of the UN, by the end of this year, Ukraine will submit for General Assembly consideration updated resolutions on human rights situation in the occupied Crimea and militarization of the occupied peninsula. Israel supports Ukraine not only in the issue of territorial integrity. Volodymyr Zelenskyy emphasized that free trade area agreement opened new opportunities for expanding bilateral cooperation. However, the size of direct Israeli investments in Ukraine may be higher. In addition, Israel can effectively use the colossal potential of Ukraine that is the new technological space of Europe.
Новітні технології.
The latest technologies and innovations, cybersecurity, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, space programs, banking and finance, construction and agriculture are just some of the promising areas for the development of investment cooperation between our states. Ukraine waits for Israeli investors, and our government and me personally guarantee the protection of all investments. Both leaders paid special attention to the memory of Baben Yar victims. They emphasized the importance of educational work on the Holocaust and Holodomor in Ukraine of 1932 to 1933, both at national and international levels. I'm very grateful to the President and the Parliament for promoting the anti-Semitism countering law. We must learn a lesson from history, humanity as a whole, and Europe in particular. I hope that my visit will contribute to the intensification and prosperity of our partnership. On the 26th of December, Ukraine and Israel will mark the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations establishment. On this occasion, Isaac Herzog invited Volodymyr Zelenskyy to visit Israel. Reported by Nick Starkov, Yulia Granovska for UATV News.
Russia continues gas blackmail, so increasing its own gas production is a matter of national security of Ukraine. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced this at a government meeting. Ukraine has accumulated almost 19 billion cubic meters of gas in gas storage facilities. This volume is enough for the country to survive the winter in warmth. The infrastructure is 99% ready for the new heating season, the Prime Minister said.
Перед керівництвом Нафтогазу та Укргазвидобування
The government sets a task for the leadership of Naftogaz to increase production of its own gas. All the tools were provided for this. Plots for production have been assigned, licenses have been granted, there are agreements on the distribution of products. Increasing this gain is a national security issue.
The Prime Minister also told about the coronavirus in Ukraine. The situation is acquiring an alarming scale, Denis Shmyhal emphasized. Therefore, this week, some areas may fall into the red quarantine zone. The Ministry of Health of Ukraine has updated the data on the epidemiological situation. Now 11 areas correspond to the orange zone of the adaptive quarantine. Meanwhile, more than 117,000 people have been vaccinated from COVID-19 over the past day. 98% of people who are now admitted to hospitals with COVID are unvaccinated. 98% of those who die from COVID-19 over the age of 60 are unvaccinated. In Ukraine, there is a sufficient number of vaccines from different manufacturers. The Ministry of Health is encouraged to contact the vaccination center.
На сьогодні в Україні є 11 мільйонів доз вакцин.
Today there are 11 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines from various manufacturers in Ukraine. All of them are safe and effective. They are approved by the World Health Organization for emergency use. Vaccination will protect you from severe illness and hospitalization for COVID-19.
According to the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, over 12,000 new COVID-19 cases have been identified over the past day. Most of the infected are in Kharkiv, Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The Ministry of Health emphasizes that vaccination is the most effective protection against COVID-19. The department also urges to wear masks and keep social distance. For the first time, doctors in Dnipro underwent bone marrow autotransplantation to a 4-year-old child. The operation consisted in taking the required amount of healthy stem cells from the boy and temporarily freezing them. Then doctors gave the child a course of high-dosage chemotherapy and returned his native stem cells again. How successful was the operation? Our correspondent will tell. Doctors discovered a tumor in Maxim's kidney 3 years ago, when the boy was just 1 year old. He underwent a course of chemotherapy and was operated, but soon metastases were found in the lung and then in the bone tissue. The treatment began anew. When the condition was stabilized, the parents were offered to undergo autotransplantation of bone marrow. We collected our own stem cell, bone marrow. We froze it, put it in the refrigerator for storage, and then, when the stage of high-dose chemotherapy approached, we placed it in a sterile box. We returned him his own stem cell. Previously, such operations in Ukraine were carried out only at the National Cancer Institute and the Kyiv Okhmadit. In Dnipro, Maxim became the first patient to receive autotransplantation. The boy's mother says it was the only chance for them. And we decided to do this. My husband was in boxing with him for 21 days. I was behind the walls. I was cooking. It was all in disposable dishes. A team of oncologists and hematologists underwent 2 weeks of training at the Cancer Institute to do such transplants. And 2 more weeks they spent at online courses with colleagues from Belarus. We watched how the therapy was prescribed, how it all goes, how the stem cells is harvested and freezes. There are special instructions. After transplantation, Maxim's stem cells grafted. Doctors say thanks to this, they managed to achieve a stable remission.
Successful transplantation requires the work of many specialists. First of all, of course, oncohematologists, anesthesiologists, surgeons. And also a very, very important role is the work of the laboratory.
Such operations became possible thanks to new equipment, which was purchased this year at the expense of the regional budget.
An analyzer was purchased for almost 5 million hryvnia, which allows you to carry out just such analysis. In addition, charitable foundations helped with some equipment. Therefore, today the regional hospital has almost 100% of the equipment for carrying out such highly technological operations.
Doctors in Dnipro plan to take children from other regions of Ukraine for autotransplantation. And they are already preparing for more complex transplants from non-native donors. Reported by Natalia Husak, UATV News. The Ukrainian Greco-Roman wrestler Jean Beleniuk decided to sell the gold medal of the 2020 Olympics. He wrote about this on his Facebook page. The wrestler promises to send the proceeds to charity, in particular to help sick children.
It is the honor and pride of our country, and I'm grateful to God and the team that I was lucky enough to bring the only gold medal for Ukraine, but I also want to make sure that this medal is useful. Jean Beleniuk, Greco-Roman style wrestler, Olympic champion Tokyo 2020.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for staying with the UATV channel. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.